Imagine the quiet dignity of a lifelong healer, a retired doctor who spent 4 decades saving lives, stepping into the wilderness of Mount Rainier for what he called one last solo reflection before embracing retirement with the woman he loved, only to vanish forever, leaving behind a devoted wife who refused to accept the easy answers of suicide or tragic accident. For years later, a waterlogged backpack trapped in a beaver dam whispers the first crack in the official story, proving that sometimes the mountain doesn't claim its victims by chance, but by human design. This is the true inspired tale of Charlotte Henley, whose relentless search for truth transformed unimaginable grief into a beacon of moral courage, exposing corruption that hid behind the noble mask of medicine. In this video, we journey through 5 profound chapters of discovery, betrayal, and redemption, while mastering advanced English vocabulary, powerful idioms like "see through the mask" to recognize someone's true intentions behind a false appearance, and timeless philosophical lessons on integrity, justice, and the courage required to stand alone when everyone else looks away. Prepare to witness how one woman's refusal to let go can unravel decades of lies and remind us all that the pursuit of truth is the highest form of love. In the shadow of Mount Rainier, known to the indigenous Puyallup people as Tahoma, the Mother Mountain, whose glaciers have carved the Pacific Northwest for millennia, Charlotte Henley cracked eggs into a sizzling pan on an ordinary October morning in 2026, for years to the day since her husband Robert kissed her goodbye and disappeared into the wilderness he revered. The kitchen window framed the distant volcanic silhouette, a constant, silent witness to the life they had built together. 40 years of marriage, a medical practice filled with grateful patients, weekend hikes, and quiet evenings planning the Alaska cruise they would never take. Robert Henley, MD, had been the embodiment of the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm, a principle rooted in the 5th century BCE teachings of Hippocrates himself, the Greek physician regarded as the father of Western medicine whose ethical code still shapes modern healthcare. Yet on October 15, 2022, that same oath had apparently led him to a fatal confrontation with the very corruption he had sworn to oppose. Charlotte's hands trembled not from age, but from the fresh wound reopened by Ranger Mike Patterson's phone call. Hikers had found Robert's gray and blue backpack, her 60th birthday gift complete with the signature red carabiner, lodged in a beaver dam 8 miles downstream from Spray Falls. The discovery shattered the long-accepted narrative that Robert, a meticulous and safety-obsessed hiker of 30 years, had either taken his own life in a moment of retirement despair or perished in a random fall after straying off-trail. As Charlotte drove the familiar winding road to the ranger station, past the coffee shop where Robert bought his daily black coffee, past the park where colleagues once surprised him with a Mount Rainier-shaped retirement cake, memories flooded her like the Nisqually River after spring melt. She remembered his excitement counting down retirement days on the kitchen calendar in red marker, his gentle teasing about teaching their grandson to fly fish in Oregon, his promise that every single day from now on belongs to us. At the station, Detective Morrison and Ranger Patterson presented the waterlogged pack on a conference table. Inside lay warped medical license, faded hiking permit, and a cracked phone whose GPS memory card, damaged antenna and all, still held damning data. Robert had deliberately left marked trails, traveling miles into unmarked wilderness before the signal died. Charlotte's protest: he never went off trail. He filed plans, carried backup batteries, checked weather 3 times, met polite but firm skepticism. The official conclusion: probable suicide or accident in a remote ravine where, after 4 years of weather, wildlife, and decomposition, recovery was statistically impossible. Yet one detail gnawed at her. The beaver dam lay far downstream from any logical path. Water flow patterns suggested the pack had traveled a great distance, implying Robert had been somewhere entirely different from where search teams had focused 4 years earlier. Leaving the station clutching photocopies, Charlotte felt the familiar ache of not knowing sharpen into something new: suspicion. She drove to Cascade Medical Associates, now starkly modern under new ownership, and found Sarah Winters, Robert's favorite nurse of 15 years. Sarah's face crumpled with shared grief before hardening with memory. In his final week, Robert had been anxious, distracted, hands shaking over untouched sandwiches, constantly checking his phone. Behavior Sarah had never witnessed even during the most harrowing emergency surgeries. More troubling still, Dr. James Harrison, Robert's boss and longtime friend, had insisted on personally handling every patient transition file when Robert retired, refusing help from the team and working late into the night, carting boxes home instead of using the office records room. Harrison, who once preached that patient care comes first, had since sold the practice for millions, opened a lavish multi-specialty clinic with state-of-the-art equipment, and become a conference speaker on innovative billing practices and maximizing healthcare profits, a dramatic shift that Sarah quietly disapproved of. Charlotte left the office with a single burning question echoing the philosophical teaching of Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative, 1785 act only according to that maxim, whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. Robert had lived by that principle. Perhaps someone else had not. As she sat alone in the break room where Robert once shared lunch with lonely staff, Sarah's parting words lingered. Whatever happened on that mountain, it wasn't because he wanted to leave you. The idiom, leave no stone unturned, to search exhaustively for answers, originally from ancient Greek oracles who examined every surface, now defined Charlotte's resolve. She drove straight to the storage unit, determined to re-examine every box she had sealed in grief for years earlier. What hidden truth might lie in the handwriting of a man who never lied to his wife in 40 years? And how much courage does it take to reopen wounds you thought had finally scarred over? Afternoon sunlight slanted through the storage unit's small window, turning floating dust motes into miniature galaxies as Charlotte knelt among cardboard boxes that smelled of mothballs and old paper. She moved methodically, the same precision Robert had used when charting patient histories, until she found his leather day planner wedged between medical journals. Flipping to October 2022, her breath caught at the entry for Thursday the 15th, the day he vanished. Meeting with Harrison. Trail parking lot. 7 a.m. Yet Robert had told her over breakfast that he needed a solo hike to process the big life change, kissing her forehead with the calm assurance of a man simply seeking mountain clarity. Why the lie? Further back, Wednesday's page listed Patterson and Associates, 2 p.m. 3 consultations that month with an employment law firm specializing in whistleblower protections. A quick call revealed the truth Robert had kept from her. He had sought legal advice on documenting workplace wrongdoing and shielding his family from retaliation if he came forward. The attorney remembered him clearly, careful, worried, asking repeatedly whether loved ones would be safe. Charlotte's mind raced to historical parallels. The courage of Aaron Brockovich in 1993, who exposed groundwater contamination in Hinckley, California, risking everything to protect a community from corporate negligence, or Daniel Ellsberg's release of the Pentagon Papers in 1971, revealing decades of government deception at great personal cost. Robert, too, had been building a case, quietly, methodically, against the very practice he had helped build. Back home, she had barely unloaded the boxes when Dr. James Harrison's silver Mercedes pulled into her driveway, license plate HEAL R1 gleaming in the October light. Harrison's smile was warm, his suit immaculate, yet Charlotte noticed the slight tremor in his hands, the too tight set of his jaw when her neighbor innocently mentioned the storage unit visit. "Find anything interesting?" he asked with feigned casualness, eyes flicking to the visible boxes in her car. The question carried the weight of threat masked as concern. The idiom, a wolf in sheep's clothing, someone dangerous pretending to be harmless, from Aesop's fable circa 600 BC, had never felt more literal. Harrison lingered, suggesting coffee at their old favorite spot, Corner Coffee on Main. Charlotte agreed, not out of trust, but calculation, texting her sister Ellen a safety warning: if no contact in 2 hours, call police. At the coffee shop, she chose a visible table in the busy main area, declining the cozy back corner Harrison preferred. Over vanilla latte and black coffee, his questions grew pointed. Had she found work files? Patient documents? Robert's planner? Each probe revealed cracks in the mask, sweat beading on his forehead, fingers drumming an anxious rhythm, voice sharpening when Charlotte mentioned the October 15th entry. Harrison's story shifted instantly. Robert had called him at 6:30 a.m. sounding depressed and confused. The planner note was a misunderstanding born of mental strain. Retirement had broken him. But Charlotte knew Robert's handwriting, firm, precise, never wavering even during 16-hour hospital shifts. She stood abruptly, leaving Harrison trembling, coffee cup rattling. In the restroom, she dialed 911, whispering her fear. Returning, she found Harrison blocking her exit, pretense gone. "Don't lie to me," he hissed. "I know," he kept copies. His grip on her elbow turned bruising as he forced her outside, gun pressed against her ribs, shoving her into his Mercedes. The drive toward Mount Rainier became a terrifying confession. Robert had uncovered years of insurance fraud, billing for ghost procedures, dead patients, falsified records, and worse, Harrison's involvement in an illegal organ trafficking network using the practice as cover. Robert had refused money, refused silence, planned to go to the FBI that very afternoon. "He should have taken the money," Harrison repeated, voice eerily calm. One sanctimonious doctor was going to destroy dozens of families. As the road turned to gravel and forest closed in, Charlotte recognized the Sunrise area trailhead Robert had driven to 4 years earlier. Harrison parked in a remote clearing, gun steady. "Your husband liked to hike. Let's see if the mountain gives you clarity." He marched her down a narrow trail, barrel against her spine, ranting about ruined legacies and self-righteous friends. 50 yards in, distant sirens pierced the quiet. Harrison froze, panic erupting. Charlotte's restroom call had worked. Officers surrounded them. Detective Morrison's megaphone ordered Harrison to release her. In the standoff, Harrison's arm locked around Charlotte's throat, gun to her temple, body shaking with rage and fear. "He destroyed everything," he screamed. When a negotiator stepped closer, Harrison snapped, slamming the gun against Charlotte's head. She crumpled. The moment her body dropped, officers tackled him. Harrison fought wildly, still shouting that Robert's righteousness had cost him his empire. EMTs rushed Charlotte, pressing gauze to her bleeding scalp while she watched the man who delivered Robert's eulogy dragged away in cuffs, pine needles clinging to his tailored suit. The idiom, "the truth will out," Shakespeare, The Merchant of Venice, 1596 to 1599, meaning hidden facts eventually emerge, had proven itself once again. But at what cost? How much pain must one endure before the courage to question those in power becomes not just personal, but a moral obligation we all share? Under police station fluorescent lights, Charlotte refused hospital transport until her full statement was recorded, butterfly bandage holding her scalp wound closed. Detective Morrison listened without interruption as Charlotte recounted every step. Backpack discovery, Sarah's memories, storage unit revelations, Harrison's driveway ambush, coffee shop confrontation, abduction, forest standoff. When Morrison returned from Harrison's interrogation room, her expression was grave yet triumphant. Harrison had broken. He confessed to murder, not accident, not suicide, but premeditated killing. On October 15, 2022, Harrison and 2 accomplices, maintenance workers paid for off-the-books tasks, met Robert at the trailhead under pretense of private discussion. They hiked with him for an hour, reaching a remote 200-foot overlook. One final bribe offer was refused. Robert stated he would contact the FBI that afternoon. Harrison, or one of his men, pushed Robert over the edge onto jagged rocks below. Death, Morrison assured Charlotte, was instantaneous. The men damaged the GPS antenna, tossed the pack into the river hoping it would vanish, and returned to plant the suicide narrative. Harrison's empire, built on 15 years of insurance fraud and black market organ trafficking, had depended on silence. Robert's evidence, copied records, altered patient files, suspicious deposits, threatened everything. Historical precedent abounded. The 1976 exposure of the Tuskegee syphilis study, where the U.S. Public Health Service withheld treatment from African American men for 40 years in the name of research, showed how medical trust can cloak atrocity. Harrison's network echoed that betrayal on a modern scale. Charlotte learned the FBI was now dismantling an interstate conspiracy, Harrison's accomplices already in custody, his lavish clinic under seizure. Most importantly, a recovery helicopter had located skeletal remains lodged in the ravine exactly where Harrison described. DNA would confirm, but Charlotte knew Robert was coming home. Tears fell freely, not only for loss, but for pride. Robert had died protecting patients from a predator, wearing a physician's coat, choosing canteen duty over personal safety. He had consulted lawyers, gathered proof, kept Charlotte ignorant to shield her, the final act of a lifetime devoted to others. As she signed her statement, philosophical wisdom from Socrates rang clear. We should prefer to suffer injustice than to commit it. Robert had suffered the ultimate injustice to prevent far greater harm. Modern relevance struck hard. In an era of healthcare whistleblowers facing retaliation, consider the ongoing struggles of nurses and doctors exposing unsafe hospital conditions post-2020. Robert's story reminded viewers that integrity often demands solitude and sacrifice. Charlotte left the station as sunset painted Rainier pink and gold, already planning a funeral with full honors. Harrison would face murder, fraud, and trafficking charges. Justice, delayed for years, had finally arrived. Yet the deepest lesson lay in Charlotte's transformation, from grieving widow frozen in not knowing to active seeker who turned suspicion into evidence, fear into a 911 call, grief into testimony. The idiom, turn over a new leaf, to make a fresh start or change behavior, originally from turning book pages, captured her journey perfectly. She had not merely survived, she had honored Robert by refusing to let evil hide behind respectability. What would you risk? Comfort, safety, illusion of friendship, to protect what is right, and how would that single choice redefine the legacy you leave behind? Months later, under a crisp spring sky, Charlotte stood at Robert's graveside on a gentle hill overlooking Tahoma's northern flank. The coffin, draped in the Puyallup tribe's mountain prayer flag at her request, held what recovery teams could return: bones identified by DNA, wedding rings still on one finger. Colleagues, former patients, including Mrs. Yamamoto, now in her 90s, nurses, even strangers moved by news coverage filled the chairs. Sarah Winters read a eulogy Robert would have loved: simple, honest, focused on lives touched rather than titles earned. Charlotte spoke last, voice steady despite tears. Robert believed medicine was a covenant, not a business. When he discovered betrayal within that covenant, he did not look away. He gathered evidence, sought counsel, prepared to speak, even knowing the cost. He died protecting patients he would never meet, strangers whose names he never learned. That is who he was. The crowd's silence carried weight. Many wept for a man most had never known personally, yet whose moral compass now guided them. After the service, Charlotte walked alone to the trailhead where Robert's final hike began. She carried no pack, only his red carabiner clipped to her wrist, a talisman of the methodical love that had anchored their life together. Standing at the information board, she traced the same route he had planned for years earlier, now marked with new warning signs about staying on trail. Yet she knew his deviation had not been error or despair, but deliberate confrontation. Philosophical reflection turned to Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher enslaved in ancient Rome who taught, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Charlotte had reacted with courage, questioning authority, risking her life, ensuring truth prevailed. Modern relevance shone brightly. In 2025 to 2026, whistleblower protections under U.S. law had strengthened following high-profile healthcare fraud cases, yet many still hesitated, fearing retaliation. Charlotte's story, already featured in medical journals and true crime podcasts, inspired training modules on ethical reporting. English learners absorbed advanced vocabulary, premeditated, planned in advance, especially a crime, covenant, solemn agreement, retaliation, harmful action in response, and idioms like blow the whistle, expose wrongdoing, from referees stopping play, through her narrative. As she turned from the trailhead, Charlotte felt Robert's presence not in ghostly form, but in the certainty that integrity outlives flesh. Harrison's trial loomed. Convictions would follow. The organ trafficking network had crumbled. Defrauded patients received restitution. Robert's sacrifice had borne fruit. Charlotte returned home to a calendar newly marked, not with red excess of waiting, but with plans, visiting grandchildren, teaching fly fishing, volunteering at free clinics in Robert's name. Grief remained, soft and permanent, yet it no longer paralyzed. She had turned mourning into mission. The mountain stood unchanged, silent, majestic, indifferent, yet for Charlotte it now symbolized endurance rather than loss. What injustice in your own world are you tempted to ignore, and what small, brave step could you take today to honor the part of you that still believes right should prevail? Years after the funeral, Charlotte Henley became a quiet but powerful advocate, speaking at medical conferences, sitting on ethics panels, mentoring young doctors about the courage required when systems fail their own ideals. Her home office held two framed items side by side: Robert's medical license, recovered from the backpack, and a news clipping headlined, "Whistleblower's Widow Brings Down Multi-Million Healthcare Fraud Ring." She never remarried, yet never felt alone. Robert's values lived in every choice she made. Mount Rainier remained her touchstone. Each spring she hiked a short, safe trail with grandchildren, pointing out Beaver dams and explaining how one small object caught in branches could preserve truth for years. The philosophical teaching of Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor and author of Man's Search for Meaning, 1946, resonated deeply. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Charlotte had chosen truth over comfort, justice over silence, love over fear. For English learners worldwide, her story offered rich material. Complex sentence structures. Although grief threatened to paralyze her, Charlotte channeled sorrow into action, proving that resilience often emerges precisely where despair seems deepest. Phrasal verbs: dig up the past, stand up to corruption, break down under pressure, and cultural idioms explained contextually: give someone the benefit of the doubt, assume innocence until proven otherwise. The truth is stranger than fiction. Reality can be more astonishing than invented tales. Modern viewers connected her journey to ongoing battles against institutional wrongdoing, whether in healthcare, finance, or tech, reminded that one individual's refusal to stay silent can ripple outward, dismantling empires built on lies. As Charlotte grew older, she began each morning with the same ritual: cracking eggs into a pan while watching Tahoma rise through mist, whispering thanks to the husband who taught her that love sometimes demands the hardest truths. She never stopped missing him, yet never regretted the fight that brought him home. In the end, the mountain had not claimed him. Human greed had. But human courage, hers and his, had reclaimed the story. And so the final, quiet lesson settled over her life like morning fog. Integrity is not inherited or accidental. It is chosen, moment by moment, even when the cost feels unbearable. What will you choose the next time silence seems safer than speaking? And how will that single decision echo through the lives you touch long after you are gone?